I messed up. He overheard my affair moving in the closet, slammed the doors open, then this happened. Do things like second chances really exist? Or is it just a word that only gives people a thin hope to hold on to? I'm so desperate right now, and I don't know what I have to do to make amends for the mistake I made. A mistake that tore me apart and left me naked to reality. A reality that is so painful to bear as every passing minute and hour shreds every little hope I'm holding on to, breaking me and leaving me helpless. I keep fighting to come to terms with the fact that I messed up and it's all my fault, and I have no one else to blame for it other than myself. I was such an idiot to let my jealousy and insecurities get the best of me, which led me to a dark path of no return. If only I could go back to that one moment, I'd be willing to give up anything just to earn that chance. My name is Patricia, and I'm 29 years old. My husband Stephen and I have been together for 6 years now, although we've only been married for 4 years. We had dated for 2 years before we both decided to spend forever together. A promise I had failed to keep and ended up ruining the happy life we had together. Stephen and I have been together for years now, and he has been a loving and supportive husband to me, despite the fact that I have not been able to give him a child. His undying love for me still remained the same, and he had never for once, not even for a moment, made me feel like I am not a complete woman and do not deserve him. He gave deaf ears to his family, who kept pressuring him to divorce me and marry someone else so he could have a family of his own, which made me feel so sad and guilty that I had taken his biggest happiness away and destroyed his trust in us. One time I got so frustrated and asked him to listen to his family and marry someone else, or better still, find another woman who could give him a child, but he had gotten so mad and asked me never to bring up such matters with him again. He gave me assurance when he told me that I am all he needs and I was forever going to be the only woman in his life, and I should never think I am not enough for him. But that didn't change anything. His family finally started displaying their bitterness to my face and kept rubbing it on my face, saying things like, "I do not deserve to be called a woman." His sister went on saying that my past had caught up with me and I am just getting back what I truly deserve. His family had been against our marriage from the beginning, as they wanted their son to get married to one of their business partner's daughters, but he had refused and married me instead. Since then, their hatred for me had been the same, and it only became worse when I couldn't give their son a child. I tried to remain strong and unaffected because I was confident that my husband loved me so much, and nothing was going to take that from me. Things had been going that way until my jealousy and insecurities kicked in and dumped me in the situation that I am now. It all started when his ex, Kate, the daughter of Stephen's family business partner, the one that he was originally supposed to get married to, returned from the United Kingdom. She had left the country after my wedding with Stephen out of spite that he had chosen me over her. And now she has finally returned after 4 long years. She had resumed work in my husband's company, and the thought that the both of them are seeing each other every single day had taken a toll on me. And that's how everything fell apart for me. I wish I had trusted my husband more. I wish I had believed and held on to his words. Maybe things would have been different, and I wouldn't have been in this situation now. My husband is a busy man, but he had never let that get in between the both of us. I came first before anything, and that made me feel so special. He would always try his best to be home on time for dinner, adjust his work schedule to go on dates with me, never miss out on both our birthdays and wedding anniversary, and most importantly, he would always work from home on weekends. But all that began to change, and it happened shortly after Kate arrived. At least to me it felt that way. That was how I saw things. One time I bumped into her in a mall when I went shopping, and she had asked us to grab a cup of coffee together and talk. I felt the urge to refuse, but I had accepted, as I felt I had nothing to lose since I am Stephen's wife, and there was nothing she or anyone could do to change that. She told me I looked too good for someone who is robbing someone of a lifetime happiness, and those words hit me so hard. She went on by saying that from the start I wasn't the right person for Stephen, and the earliest I admit that the better it would be for all of us. She revealed to me that Stephen's family had reached out to her and asked her to forgive Stephen, and that they've also asked her to give their relationship another chance, and that was one of the main reasons she had returned. She made it clear that the other reason she was back was to get me out of Stephen's life and become Stephen's life partner, which was something that should have happened years back If only I had known my place and not forced my way into Stephen's life. The earlier I admit that she is the right person for Stephen, the easier things will be for both of us, and although it's a sad truth, I could never be better than her. She spoke so curtly to me, and her words crippled me. It affected me so much in a sense that no matter how hard I tried to deny it, I still had to agree in my head that she was right, and she was better than me in every way I could think of. Her family was so rich and influential, unlike my family who had nothing grand to offer and were living off the support of my husband. I was working as a chef until after I had a miscarriage, and Stephen was strongly against me working, and since then I've just been at home. Kate is a very beautiful and talented young lady, around my age or maybe a year older, but compared to her I am nothing close to her level. She had a lot of men rolling at her feet, which made me feel so inferior, and I kept questioning the fact that my husband would say no to such a person and choose me instead. Kate kept raining demeaning words at me, and I just sat there like an idiot and took everything in until she was done and took her leave. I went home after that day, and since then, things had never been the same for me. I became so sensitive and started nitpicking every single thing. It started when my husband started coming home late from work, and unlike before, we would always eat together no matter what. But then, he would tell me he had already had dinner and sometimes use the excuse that he was tired, and just like that, things began to change slowly. He would always step out to work early and come back very late at night. I would sometimes fall asleep on the sofa from waiting all night for him. I complained to him about it, and he told me things had gotten more tedious at the company, and it needed so much of his time that I should try to understand, and once things settle, everything would go back to the way it was before. But that didn't happen. Instead, things became more and more complicated. He started working on weekends too, and one time he forgot about our date together. I got so frustrated and scared too, to the point that I had a big argument with him that night. He left early the next morning after leaving flowers and a note beside the bed. It turned out he had gone for a business trip, and he couldn't tell me about it because I was still upset about last night. He promised to make it up to me when he got back. I went home to visit my family, and that's when I met my longtime childhood friend Dave. Dave and I have been so close that we share almost everything together. We had been so glued together that even when I got married to Stephen, it puzzled a lot of people, including our parents. After spending time with my parents, we decided to hang out and catch up a bit. It was so strange that our bond and closeness still felt the same, and it felt so nice to finally have someone I could really rely on back in my life. I asked him about his life, and he told me so much, but when he asked me about mine, I started tearing up. I opened up to him about what I had been going through ever since I got married to Stephen and how his family treated me. I told him about Stephen's ex coming back to the country and how scared I was that my husband is cheating on me. Dave sat speechless as he couldn't say or do anything but watched me cry. And I could see the fact that he was upset. It was written all over his face. After our hangout that day, we both parted ways, and I went back to my world. Fast forward to the day my husband had returned from his business trip. He had called to inform me that he would be back home in the evening and that he had to stop at the office for something important. Hearing that, I decided to surprise him with lunch at the office, as it had been ages I did that, but maybe that was something I never should have done. When I arrived at his office, I had stopped his secretary from informing him about my presence as I wanted to surprise him, but I got surprised myself. I saw him and Kate in the office together, and they were both smiling sweetly at each other. The next thing that happened was that Kate moved closer to him and fixed his necktie, and the more she got closer to him, the more it looked like they were kissing. I couldn't bear to watch anymore, and I rushed out of the office. I felt so betrayed that my husband came home from a 2-week trip and he had not even bothered to see my face, but hurried over to the office to greet his new lover. I went back home and laid on my bed, swelling up from anger and jealousy. Just then, useless thoughts began to fill my head. So when my husband came home that night, we didn't even have dinner together or talk much, and he was already asleep. I couldn't sleep that night, and immediately he fell asleep. I quickly reached for his phone as if I had been casting a sleeping spell on him, waiting for it to take effect. Instantly, I went to his call history, and the thing I was most afraid struck me hard. Kate was the most frequent person on his call list. I went to his message box and I could see all the intimate messages Kate had been sending to him, although I couldn't find any reply from him, which bothered me more. I immediately concluded that my husband was seeing Kate too, and that was so stupid of me to think in such a way. As usual, he left to work that morning, but this time he didn't come home that night and didn't call either. I had called to hear from him, but Kate answered the phone and asked me not to bother them again. Her words cut me in the chest, and I had no idea when I reached for my phone and called Dave. We agreed to meet up at a bar in his hotel, and just like that, I found myself drinking and partying like a teenager. I had clearly forgotten I was married and got so drunk that night. While talking to Dave, I told him I was tired of my life, and I do not see the point of living anymore if I lose my husband. That was when Dave told me he still had feelings for me, and he hated it so much that I was being this way because of another man. Dave's feelings for me were no secret, but back then, I just couldn't marry him because Steven was the better option. Steven had everything, and Dave, on the other hand, was just starting out with life, and I just couldn't settle with someone at my level, so I had married Steven instead. But hearing Dave's confession filled my head with useless thought, and I started imagining how my life would have panned out if I had chosen Dave. Before I could get to a conclusion with my imagination, Dave and I were already kissing. It all happened so fast, and before I knew it, we had slept with each other that night, and just like that, I had made the biggest mistake of my life. I woke up that morning and hurried back to my house as I was scared my husband must be home already, only to meet Kate waiting outside. When I asked her what she was doing at my place, she told me that Steven had asked her to get some important files for him, and I should start getting used to the idea that she would be relieving me of my duties soon, and I should enjoy it while it lasts. I was feeling guilty about what had happened between me and Dave, and the fact I cheated on my husband was overwhelming, but strangely, after seeing Kate and hearing her hateful words, I felt no regret about what I did that night, and just like that, I started doing things my way. When my husband would complain about how things were between us, I would ignore him, telling him we should both understand ourselves and get used to the way things were between us, and that with time, things would return to the way it was before. I was repeating his exact words, just the way he had told me before he became completely lost in his world. My husband understood I was sulking about something and did his best to make peace with me, but I wasn't giving him the green light. My mind was already overwhelmed with Dave, and I started spending most of my days with him. We would even go on dates and trips together, and just like that, I had slowly turned something so barbaric into one of the most beautiful experiences a lady could wish for. Things started getting out of hand, and I realized I had completely lost it when I forgot about my own husband's birthday. My mind was so focused on the trip Dave and I had planned to go, and I had left early that morning with Dave for the trip. I completely forgot that day was my husband's birthday. That day, my husband came home early and prepared dinner. Imagine having a birthday, and instead of coming home to a surprise from your wife, you end up being the one to prepare everything yourself. But Steven didn't mind. I came home late that night only to meet him waiting, and that's when it hit me that his birthday was that day. I couldn't say anything as I was worried he would make an issue about it, and my little secret might come to light, but to my greatest surprise, he only walked up to me and gave me a big hug. He hugged me so tight that something in me started bleeding. I don't know why, but at that moment I felt so bad and I started tearing up. We both had dinner that night and made love, and for a moment I felt I had my marriage back on track, only to continue with my madness the next day. It is very true when people say that once you make a mistake once, doing it for a second time is very easy, and it continues until it finally becomes a part of you. That was exactly what happened to me. Though I felt bad about what I was doing, I just couldn't bring myself to stop, and the fact that both of them made me happy was just something I did not want to lose. I just wasn't ready to let go of Dave, neither was I ready to let go of my husband too, and the fact that my husband was completely clueless about my affair gave me more confidence, and I felt no shame. About 3 weeks back, my husband had left that morning for an important business trip. He had clearly told me he wouldn't be back for about a month, and if I needed anything, I shouldn't hesitate to let him know. It wasn't even up to 2 hours after my husband left, and I had already called Dave over. The moment he arrived at the door, I was already in a bathrobe waiting for him, and the second I heard the doorbell, I seductively reached for the door. The moment he walked towards me, I shut the door behind him and he hungrily stripped me off the bathrobe and had me there in the living room. As if that wasn't enough for me, we kept kissing, and in seconds we were upstairs in my matrimonial bed where Dave devoured all the light out of me. The fun we had that day hit differently, and just when our dirty moment was about to reach its crescendo, we heard hurried footsteps heading towards the door, and just like that, Dave squirreled away into the closet. Before I could cover myself up properly, the doors to the room banged open, and I almost wet myself at the sight of my husband in front of me. He had the eyes of a psychopath, and that alone portrayed what was yet to befall me. My husband's eyes kept hovering around the room like an untamed lion searching for its prey, and as the devil would love it and wouldn't let me go unpunished, a sneaky sound emitted from the closet. Just like a tornado, my husband stormed there and slammed the doors open, and behold, my naked affair was right in front of him. I could see the real definition of the phrase, the skeleton in my closet, as mine was just laid out naked in front of my husband. A deep chuckle escaped his lips, and before I could start begging, 4 of my husband's bodyguards rushed in and dragged Dave out of the closet naked, not giving him a chance to even cover himself. I could tell it was over for him, or should I say the both of us. I immediately fell on his feet and grabbed his legs as I started begging him for mercy. He looked at me with intense disgust, and I could clearly see the contempt in his eyes. My whole body was trembling as my secret was out in the public. I can remember clearly how he threw my hands away. Then, he took angry strides downstairs, and I hurried after him, wailing and pleading. My voice disappeared, like I became mute when I saw how the bodyguards handled Dave, and I couldn't recognize him anymore. He had been beaten up so badly before the cops arrived and took him away. I kept begging Stephen, but all my begging fell on sealed ears, and if I even made an attempt to hold him, his eyes were sharp enough to chop my hands off. I was so scared of the man in front of me. I was so terrified that all I could do was sob. He calmly made a quick phone call, and the next thing that happened was that he left the house. I could see the flood of joy and satisfaction on Kate's face as she followed after Stephen. So I just laid there crying, and I have been crying non-stop for days now. I haven't seen or heard from my husband since then, and he had frozen all my cards and blocked all means of communication, so I couldn't reach out to him. I went to his parents' house to plead and ask for their help, as I had no idea what to do or where to start from, but I only received a decade worth of insults and ended up being flung out like some useless trash. I feel trash would have been treated better compared to the way they handled me. It was such a great opportunity for them to unleash all the anger they had been holding back because of my husband, and it was a perfect opportunity for them to finish what they couldn't with me. I have never experienced such humiliation in my life. And since then, after I returned home, I locked myself up, and all I could was wallow in regrets, as I can't figure out what to do or where to go anymore. I can't believe I lost everything just like that, and the void of guilt in me is slowly eating me away. I don't know how else to turn what happened. Is this some prank or dream? I keep asking myself so many questions I couldn't find answers to. I am in so much pain. I don't know who to ask for help anymore or how to move forward from this. Update. If there was a way one could easily deny a mistake and be free from it, then I definitely deny the mistaken choices I had made and escape from this hell I'm in. I'm so ashamed of myself, and to think there's nothing I can do to change it is a reality that is so hard to live with. If I had known then, I wouldn't have given in to such a scandal that led me to betraying and hurting the man that loved and accepted me the way I was, the man I had planned to have a future with, and now I lived the days to that future in emptiness, and the pain is killing me. I had tried everything to fix what I did, but most things in life, like trust, can never be mended when broken, and my husband proved that to me. The doorbell rang for the first time in 2 weeks after he had dumped me in our apartment without any sign of him. It had been days since someone visited, and the first person that came to my mind was my husband. I raced to the door like a mad woman and swung it open, only to see my family lawyer and a happy-looking couple. The lawyer had a look of confusion and disbelief on his face as his eyes laid on me. With my voice trembling given the fact that I was already scared of what his response would be, I asked him what was happening. He responded by telling me my husband had put the property out for sale and this couple had bought it, and they came to check it out. My legs lost their strength, and I crumbled to the ground. I gathered all the strength I had left and pleaded with the lawyer to tell me where I could meet my husband. I kept begging, and all of a sudden a familiar voice came from behind. It was my husband. He coldly asked what I was still doing there, and if I was too dumb to get the message that we were through with each other. Our family lawyer quickly took the couples away, leaving me and my husband alone. I swiftly rushed to him, crawling on both knees, and I kept begging him to give us one more chance. He told me there was no us, and that word didn't exist anymore, and that I had used my very own hands to tear us apart. I desperately brought up my suspicions, the suspicions that led to my downfall. I stated that he was having an affair with Kate, but I had never for once questioned or hated him for it. Then I asked him why he was making mine a big issue. I can still remember how Stephen scoffed and a perplexed look mapped over his face. He asked what I was talking about, and I told him not to play dumb. I brought up the fact that he had changed and was so busy and not giving me his time and attention like before, and how he covered up with the excuse of being tired and anything else he could come up with. He told me I was just overthinking things and I made a mess of everything for something that wasn't true, but I wasn't giving up. I needed to fight back. I was desperate, and the thought of losing everything was already getting to me. I immediately fired back about the time I had gone through his phone and seen all of Kate's messages, but he cut me off by saying Kate was nothing more than a friend and a sister to him, and he could never see her as anything more, and that and those text messages were meaningless and meant nothing to him. That was why he had never given her any reply. And no matter how much she tried, he had never let her have her way, because I was his wife, and that was all that mattered to him, and not any more. Those last words made my heartbeat seize for about 2 seconds or so. If I'm not mistaken, I felt like I was going to die soon, or I might suffer from arrhythmia after that. He went on by telling me how much humiliation and pain I had caused him. He confessed that the reason why he had been so busy with work lately was because he had requested for a transfer to their company's branch in a different country. And this was because he knew I wasn't happy with the idea that Kate was around, and his family as well wouldn't let me be in peace, so he was planning to move with me to a different country and settle there so we both could start afresh and stay far away from the chaos. He was going to tell me about it on his birthday as part of the surprise, but I didn't even remember that day was his birthday. Yeah, he had thought it was because of everything that was going on with us, and he felt like I was really stressed emotionally because of that, so he felt so guilty that night and was actually blaming himself for everything, only to realize that was not even the case to begin with. I had already found myself someone else and was making a fool out of him and our marriage. He added by saying if only I had talked about my problem with him just the way couples do, that maybe things would have turned out differently, but I had chosen to take matters into my own hands, and as a result, we are here now. Trust and patience and communication was all I was lacking, and I didn't even attempt to address that, and he was right. If only I had opened up to him, things wouldn't have gone this bad. He finally dropped the news, the one that shattered me totally, when he told me that he had filed for divorce 3 weeks ago, right before he left for a business trip, since I didn't know about it and hadn't responded or shown up. The court had already handled everything and approved the divorce. The notice must have already been sent to my parents' house. He added that Dave was still in the cops' custody and I could go ahead and bail him out since he mattered so much to me, so we could keep up from where we stopped. He concluded by asking me to get my stuff and get out, that the house was no longer his, and then he walked out on me. I immediately broke down crying and calling after him, but he wouldn't even budge or spare me a second look. He was so done with me, and I knew it was over and there was nothing I could do about it. I laid there crying for hours before finally returning to my parents' house. My dad wouldn't let me stay and kept blaming me for bringing shame to him. The fact that I was yet to give Stephen a child was already too much of an embarrassment, and I just had to drag them deeper into the mud. He asked me to find a way for myself, and that he never wants to have anything to do with me. My mom felt so sorry for me, and she had arranged a small place for me to stay, and that's where I have been living for a while now, trying to pick up the pieces left in my life. Dave got released from jail, but Stephen had made sure all of Dave's businesses had gone bankrupt, and he was left with nothing. And that was the last thing I heard about Dave. I live my life now wishing I had made a different choice, and also wishing I could go back in time and change things, but that's never happening. Now, I am left with nothing but regrets and the price of my decisions to live with.